The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, CMYK enthusiasts, creative catalysts, DIY dilettantes, paper people, and all members of the Printiverse. Welcome to Printing, Making, and the Emerging Culture of Craft, presented by Chris Harold, Vice President, Business Development, and Creative Director at Mohawk. I am Deborah Korn, representing Print Media Center. A little backstory before we start. Several years ago, I was wandering around Graph Expo and I found the Mohawk booth. A presentation was about to start and I loved paper, so I grabbed a seat. 15 minutes or so later, it was over, but it was only the beginning of my deep love and respect for Chris Harold. You can read Chris's bio on my website, but this is what I would like you to know about him. He's smart, he's creative, he's an amazing fine arts photographer. His pro-print point of view is not just to push the boundaries of possibilities, but to also create new ones. He's always ahead of what is next and this brings us to why we are here today. Printing, making, and the emerging culture of craft. Listen to what he has to say. It's going to matter, and more important, it will, even if you don't see it yet. If you're going to tweet about this presentation today, please use the hashtag makers. And now, without further ado, ladies and gents, my paper daddy and the master of making, Chris Harold.
You know, I knew you would weave in paper daddy somewhere. Thank you.
I have to.
I know you do. Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. I appreciate the opportunity to deliver this message, and you know, if you were at D-Scoop, you will have heard a version of this, but it's kind of a message that we're bringing out into the marketplace as Mohawk to really kind of look at new opportunities in the marketplace for us collectively to convey the power of print and ultimately drive sales of printed materials. Now, I'll admit somewhat of a bait and switch. I did change the title slide a little bit, just slightly, because I want us to trim our expectations to this as the topic I want to bring us down today, and that's the title slide you see up now. Meet me at the corner of tech and touch, selling print into a digital world. And as corny as that may seem, I think what I want, one point I really want to drive home is, you know, that our greatest threat is our greatest opportunity in the printing and graphic arts business. And let me open up with this next image. You know you're in trouble when some guy you've never met opens with a Charles Dickens quote for a printing presentation, right? But I thought this was, you know, kind of an interesting way of looking at our greatest threat being our greatest opportunity, reframed from Dickens saying it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And here's one really good example of that. You know, in December 2012, Newsweek published, like, it's one of my favorite images from this epic of communications, hashtag last print issue, right? You know, giving a sort of a, it's like a jab at itself, right? Like, you know, using a digital reference to announce this is the last time you'll hold Newsweek in your hands. Or so we all thought, right? So what's happened in the ensuing year and change is, you know, the people that have the ownership of the assets of this brand Newsweek, who initially brought it to a pure digital platform, actually have in the past 6 months announced the reintroduction of Newsweek in print. Now, mind you, it's now a complement to the digital media. But what's most interesting to me, and something that I want to drive home and continue along this vein, is that it's really being couched as a luxury item. So Newsweek will emerge on the newsstands again as two things that are quite different. One is in limited supply, and one is $8 at newsstand, right? So print now becomes this, if you will, luxury item in an otherwise very digitally saturated space. By the way, full admission, I'm not one of these, you know, I don't wax sort of real, you know, for the past, and, you know, That's not why I love print. I love consuming digital media. I love my iPad. I can, every morning I wake up and I read the newspaper on my iPad. That's okay. But I think that print is, in that environment, is occupying an entirely new space that spells opportunity for all of us, but we need to pay attention to, I think, cultural trends that will spell where that opportunity brings us. So let me just, on that note, I just want to point you in a direction to not trusting me saying that, but let's look at what's out there in popular culture. So Chris Anderson, and you probably all know him either as the author of The Long Tail, which has been out for a number of years now, but also he was the original executive editor of Wired magazine, right? So Chris Anderson is really, charting courses forward culturally for where we're headed, right, in terms of technology. And his latest book is called Makers, The New Industrial Revolution. And, far be it for me to summarize Chris Anderson, but I'll give it a shot here for this. Chris Anderson is essentially saying technology is an enabler, right? So our greatest threat is our greatest opportunity. So technology in the form of 3D printers and in the form of the web are creating platforms and opportunities for individuals to bring products to market very quickly. Whether, Deborah Korn and Chris Harold invent the next great silverware set and want to share it with our friends who have 3D printers in Moscow and Singapore and Los Angeles and get immediate feedback, or it's the web as a platform to bring my products and be on a global marketplace. That is what's behind this kind of thinking that Chris Anderson's got out there. Let me pivot to the patron saint of all things made and craft, Martha Stewart. Sidebar, I actually took this picture with my phone at the American Made Awards last fall. Little bit of filter, not hashtag no filter, of Martha Stewart addressing a invitation-only crowd at Grand Central Station at the second annual American Made Awards, where she, who really is an emblematic maker in sort of cultural history, is recognizing 10 great entrepreneurial American makers. In other words, people who are building what would have been at one point referred to as cottage industries, but emphasis on industries, who are emerging as food, chefs, crafters, manufacturers of clothing, who are actually building real businesses out of a craft basis. So that organization, Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia, their research shows that 57% of the U.S. population are makers, in quotes, right? I mean, that can mean anything from scrapbooking to, I'm going to build a business with my two brothers, and we are going to go to market and be the next great craft brewery. But the important piece is it's a $29 billion engine and piston in the engine of the economy. So there's real dollars being spent around a new way of starting businesses. This next slide is purposely sort of fun, funny, and otherwise ridiculous. But my purpose in including this evolution of the hipster slide is to sort of sensitize all of us. And for any of you out there who sport facial hair, sleeve tattoos, ballet flats, ironic baseball hats, or live in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, I sort of apologize. And I celebrate you more than anything, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is the community who are quickly becoming not only responsible members of our society, but business drivers. They are those fueling that $29 billion segment of the economy. And what are they doing? Here's an example, this next slide. They are companies like Brooklyn Slate. Now, by the way, just sort of director's cut to this. Pay attention to the fact that every one of these emerging companies, A, need printing, B, probably don't know how to find it, okay? So let me go back to this. Brooklyn Slate, the short version is a young couple, appropriately enough in Brooklyn. The woman in that couple, her family have a slate quarry in upstate New York on the Hudson River. And it was just a quarrying business, right, for slate for roofs and floors and so on. long story short, they took that family material, a family business she never thought she'd be involved with, and they repurposed those materials, those beautiful tactile materials, and created this company called Brooklyn Slate, and they are growing at kind of a really unbelievably interesting rate. And what they provide to the marketplace are these basically cheese slates and for charcuterie and cheese. So these have little felt feet on them, and they come beautifully packaged. They come with a soapstone pencil, the purpose of which is to display your carefully considered, locally made cheeses and charcuterie from your farmer's market, right? But using the web, they quickly became sort of a national phenomenon in the foodie community, right? And note that there's printing on it, right? Those little envelopes that are tied with that string are sort of craft paper that are printed, as are the wraps for the soapstone, and so on. And I'll share a few more instances where these companies, though enabled by the web, quickly moved to print in the form of catalogs and other pieces. This next piece, this next slide is just meant to draw your attention to the fact that printing itself is oddly emerging as kind of the new cool, right? I mean, there are letterpress printers. You can't walk 10 blocks without finding someone who's bought or was given a small letterpress and has rediscovered this very tactile, interesting way to make marks on paper, whether it's creating one-off art or communication pieces. Print is being recognized as something of incredible value in a world where digital is the new commodity, and print may in fact become the new luxury, okay? One example of print I've put in this slide here is this fellow holding a book. And that book is a Blurb ProLine book. So Blurb.com is a platform which is not quite 8-10 years old, they ostensibly were first built to really foster the growth of photo books and self-publishing, and increasingly have become an independent publishing platform, and recently have really reached out to use Amazon with some strategic alliances to allow people to independently publish, whether it's the Great American Novel or the Great American Photo Book, and have that easily distributed on the web. But getting back to this object itself, this is a Blurb ProLine book, and they use Mohawk Superfine, thank you very much. And as such, the reason that Superfine is used in ProLine books is the Blurb community about 4 years ago came back to Blurb.com, to the management team, and said, we love you, we love the workflow, we love everything about Blurb, but we want better books. To which they said, what does that mean? Do you want easier workflow? Do you want more web options? No, we want better materials. What does that mean? They want better dust jackets. They want nicer book cloth. They want better book pages, right? So that was the emergence of books that, hear me well now, these books came into the marketplace and there was a 50% upcharge, and I would submit to you that people embraced that and continue to grow that segment of their business. The next slide, and again, this is all coming out of entrepreneurial individuals who are, facing technology, embracing technology, and using it is an opportunity to build business based on things made, right? So this is Dodo Case. Dodo Case is a company in San Francisco that's...
Wait, Chris, can you hold on? Chris?
I can.
People are experiencing audio problems. I'm not really sure what the problem is.
I'll pick up my hand receiver and go really old school. Is that...
Okay, let's try that.
If it's better?
And Andrew Gordon, is that better?
Is that better,
Oh, it's with
Andrew?
both of us? It might be their connection then if it's both of us, because I hear you fine. I'm really sorry. I don't know what to say about that. All right, Chris, go.
Yes. So are we...
It's not the receiver problem. It seems like it's a broadcast problem. So please go back
could
to...
be a broadcast problem.
Yeah, I'm really sorry for anyone who can't hear. We will have a replay. Some people are saying that there's no problem. So please bear with us, or I'll make sure you get a link to the replay as soon as it's finished. Thanks, Chris. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So Dodo Case started about 3 years ago in San Francisco, and the purpose of Patrick Buckley and Craig Dalton building Dodo Case was, they launched this product in sync with the first introduction of the iPad, and their purpose was they both had a love for books and for sort of beautiful things. They went to a book bindery in San Francisco, and they came together and invented an enclosure for the iPad that uses traditional book cloth, traditional book bindery techniques, and the result is what you see on screen. And I think that's a really, really great example of this tech-touch combination in this case. So then this next image is Moo.com. And this is an example of a product line they soft launched about a year ago that we actually worked with them on. There's a line of business cards. Of course, Moo.com, if you don't know, really is all about facilitating the creation of beautiful business cards that use design and design standards and templates is a very important part of their brand. They started with mini cards and have since grown this into really like the global source for automated and beautiful high-end business cards. The latest incarnation is something called Moo Lux, which we collaborated with them on using Mohawk Superfine. And then this that I've got on screen is a Lux card with an NFC chip embedded in the middle of it. So this is a soft launch from about a year ago where it's a literal intersection of tech and touch, where a near-field communication antenna is inserted in between two layers of Superfine. So you're having a very tactile experience, almost like feeling a letterpress printed card, if you will, yet you're able to touch a smartphone to that card and be connected to the web, essentially, into another destination. And then just one more example of makers of businesses that 10 years ago, most of these didn't even exist. In the case of Minted.com, Minted is a leader in the social stationery space. All very luxurious printed cards and other social stationery, as well as a very rapidly growing on-demand framed art space. All really built around paper, around print, and around non-digital communication, but totally enabled by the web. And then this is just a pause here, back to Wired, to say, this DIY revolution, and I want you to get this right and not think I'm, totally full of hot air. I'm not talking to a bunch of printers to talk about DIY as if I'm talking about kitchen remodeling. I'm talking about the fact that there are millions of people out there in the population in the United States, many of whom are makers, many of whom go to work on a Monday morning, and they don't change their frame of reference from the weekend where they made beer. They're in a sauerkraut making group. They are building a business with their friends to introduce new jackets or messenger bags. They're hungry to find other makers to collaborate with and to be suppliers for them, right? So here's my encouragement for those of you on the phone who are printers. It's a soft, funny challenge, but it's saying, basically I'm saying, pick one of these. In this context, are you a marketing services provider, as you may have been told by lots of consultants, or are you a skilled craftsperson? Which of those roles spell greater opportunity? I would submit to you that it's being a skilled craftsperson. I think at the end of the day, there are, and this is from experience, ladies and gentlemen, it's connecting with these young new companies which spell opportunity for print. I mean, at the end of the day, we make paper. Not only are we makers, but we are a materials provider for the graphic arts industry. And I would say that our largest growth business is coming from companies that didn't exist 10 years ago who are waiting to be told how beautiful print can be. And as Deborah, I think, loves this phrase, or maybe not. I often tell people when I'm making a presentation, the old print buyer is in a nursing home or dead. They look a lot more like those people in that hipster slide. And those people, my point is, they don't really know about printing. And they probably don't really care about your presses, but they care about what the result is of those presses. They want to know that you can make something tactile. Let me give you a sidebar and then I'll talk about this print thriving in a digital age. You know, there are a number of online companies, Minted being one of them, who have recently moved to a catalog distribution, right? So they have a very dynamic web presence, very powerful interface on the web, but they have chosen to get catalogs in people's hands. And when they print those catalogs, they make them pretty beautiful because what they're trying to do is almost demonstrate their materials, but also they know the power of getting things in people's hands. Another one I'll draw your attention to, and then we'll go back to these prepared comments. Pitchfork. Pitchfork is, I don't know what the demographic looks like on this call, but you know, I'm sort of really not part of it, but I get it and sort of love it. It's an online music community, maybe a decade old, huge, massive community and following. It is strictly web-based. It's the Rolling Stone meets the internet, but there's no print. Until recently, they've just released their first version of a print magazine. It's a high-end, multiple kinds of paper. They get that their demographic, which skews 35 and under, want something to possess and hold, right? Now let me give you this next slide, Print Thriving in a Digital Age. This is a spread from our third Maker Quarterly we released a few months ago. In the content, I don't expect you to read this on here, talks about a study by the British Mail, the British Post, that talks about the power of touch. And really what's going on there is haptics and the whole notion of sensory marketing. Haptics referring to the impact psychologically of vision and touch. When you touch something, it leaves a very different footprint in your brain and causes people to react differently. In the case of print, if you're reading and turning a page or running your fingers over a page or feeling the surface of a book, you retain and react very differently to that. And it's driving things as far afield, driving sort of initiatives as far afield as education, where books are not being totally abandoned because kids are actually retaining information better when they actually read a printed book page. And certainly in the case of this Millward Brown study in the UK Post, it's pointing back to direct mail in a sea of email, which is actually the law of diminishing returns. It's getting lower rates of response. I love deleting email, FYI, unsolicited email solicitations. But boy, do I love getting something printed that's tactile. Even I'm in the industry, got fooled by an invitation to, like, I don't know, I travel quite a bit, like a platinum level Hilton Honor or something. And it came, my wife's like, why are you getting a wedding invitation just directed to you? And it was literally one of those, right? Like big V-flap, fancy, gorgeous envelope. And it was like an invitation to join like the platinum whatever. And I'm like, damn, I got fooled. That's bad / awesome. So let me give you some real tangible examples of why we, in our experience here at Mohawk, how this tech-touch combination is driving business for us. And mind you, remember who we are. You know, if you know us, if you don't know us, we're the manufacturers and purveyors of, or makers, of high-end fine paper. We don't make the cheap stuff, right? So by definition, we're kind of a luxury brand in a commodity space. So everything I'm about to tell you has been an effort to upsell, to go to the common vernacular. But let's look at it as tech and touch. So let's go to the Dish Network. So the Dish Network is a nerd network. So they literally are rocket scientists. Like, they put satellites in space so that the world can enjoy information and shared information. Generally, their hearts don't beat fast about things like paper, right? But they had a challenge that we met through one of our bright salespeople, our VP of sales actually, who met with them in their Colorado offices to talk about this very topic around the impact of tech and touch. What they were doing was, their objective in a print campaign, direct mail by the way, was to drive subscription rates higher, so more people would access the information coming from those satellites. They had previous to this point been using shiny white paper. It's what any printer wants to run every day if they have their choice. 70-pound gloss text, right? Wrong. They sensed, based on some information they'd been reading and information that Melissa Stevens from Mohawk gave them, that perhaps they could run a blind test and introduce some textured colored paper and watch what happened. Well, the watch what happened was double-digit response rate growth. So this has now gone from a fledgling test to a program piece of business for not only a printer in Colorado, but for Mohawk. And by the way, the paper was like, it's a paper that we make that from our VIA line that looks like craft paper, so it emulates that sort of brownish natural craft color, but is made reliably and consistently for performance on, I believe, offset and digital in this case. So that's
Chris,
a real tangible live. Yes.
I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
Was the test initiated by the marketing people or by the printer?
I believe the test was initiated internally, but I can find that out for you, Deborah. I could make that up and say, one for sure, but I believe it was an internal DISH deal. But I would encourage you,
Thanks.
those of you who run CMYK through your veins, don't be afraid to do this. It's, the oldest parlor trick in the book is like, just switch the paper. You don't have to buy new equipment, right? I mean, you don't have to invest in some whiz-bang piece of equipment from HP or some folder from Horizon. I mean, God, there's probably Horizon and HP people on here. Sorry. But all you need to do is literally just like, okay, let's go to the swatch cabinet. And maybe we spend a little bit more on paper. But in this case, DISH is spending more on paper. But they're like, hello, we're going to keep spending more because we're getting like a massive amount of response, a bit more than we would have thought, right? Now let's shift gears entirely. This is Felt, which I encourage you to download at the App Store or Google Play. Felt is an app that was built by, I think, again, folks in Colorado. I think, once again, here, Colorado representing. Anybody wants to give a shout out, there it is. These guys built an app that is aimed at enabling users to use a stylus, or in my case, my finger. It looks like I've had a stroke when I write with my finger on my iPad, but so that you can send a card. It's all built around the end product here is the mailing of a card, of a, if you will, a traditional card. But you're able to do it in your own hand. So you open it when you go to the app. You're prompted to go through a tray of card designs. In this case, you see this little bee on here. You tap the bee, the cover. It opens up. On the inside, you're then prompted to write with a stylus or with your fingertip to say, Dear Diane, happy birthday. Can't believe you're 36. You look awesome. Hugs and kisses. Your colleague and slightly weirdo Chris, right? And then you tap and you're prompted to go to the envelope. You then address the envelope in your own hand, and then you go into the print queue. You basically press send, and you're, for X dollars and 99 cents, that enters into a lights out print queue, I believe HP Indigo, that is appropriately on Mohawk via Felt. I mean, it is actually. And what the recipient, Diane, then receives this card that's well considered and so on. And, there's up the line, automation, can you enter birthdays for your Outlook calendar, blah, 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 whatever. But that's a really interesting example of pure technology play, driving print and making it quite easy. Huge gear shift to Nordstrom. Nordstrom, oh gosh, I can always forget what the program's called, like Nordstrom Select or Nordstrom Reward, Nordstrom Rewards. So if you're, one of, a well-heeled Nordstrom shopper and spend X thousands of dollars a year at Nordstrom's, you are entered into and part of their community of select buyers, the Nordstrom Rewards program. And what was interesting is they had been sending out communications to them via direct mail, but getting some negative feedback and sort of chatter in the system for for it not being like stand out, and they were missing the communication because it was just being sent in a number 10 envelope like a letter, right? And collectively, this was, again, Deborah, to sort of trimmed it back to your point, this was an internal thing. They kind of came together in the marketing group and said, wow, you know, this is kind of an issue here. We need to do something to get these people's attention and make sure we're benefiting from having them enrolled in this rewards program and ultimately get them to spend more money, right? So what they did is they actually called in the printer, they called in a person from Mohawk, and we came together with them and collaborated, and what they ended up doing was a very different mail campaign, upgrading the paper and the print both specifically, right? So they took the quality of both up. They ended up on the first round was on a black envelope with white printing with a textured, felt textured insert that folded out. It was like a 4-fold, so it ends up like a small poster. Incredible response from the Nordstrom Rewards community, such that it is now, much like the Dish campaign, it's now programmed, right? It's now they're onto something else. And actually what's interesting is they keep sort of hopscotching around and using more and more interesting paper to get attention. And at the end of the day, that spend is coming back to them as a return. And again, they're using kind of not a very complicated trick. They're just improving the quality of what people are holding between their thumb and their forefinger. Somewhat shameless commercial. So this is now, you know, this is our case. So what we did about, I don't know, it feels like 10 years ago, a year ago, we embarked on this really, really interesting campaign. For you know, we wanted to be, you know, I am a firm believer that we live in an opt-in culture, the opposite of which is opt-out. And to get folks' attention, in particular, the challenge for Mohawk was the creative print driving community. We wanted to make sure we met them topically where they were at and what they were interested in. And we embarked on a campaign talking about making, the culture of craft, and the business drivers that can benefit us all in the graphic art space, whether you're a graphic designer, whether you're a printer, or in our case, whether you're the materials provider, in this case paper, for that community. And this campaign is really, it's been terrific. We're just on the 4th issue of this, the quarterly, which is that larger piece you see that says Heritage and Innovation, the Craft Cooperative, which is something aimed squarely at the print community, and you know, our Craft Manifesto down below that was, some of you will have seen. What I encourage you to do, especially if you have a shingle hanging out in front of your building that says, I print things, please pay me and come back and buy more. We would love, in this case I'm showing something from Primary Color in Los Angeles. We would love to offer up those assets from our Maker Quarterly in the form of a digital file that you can co-brand with us. So you can see Primary Color did this, you know, at that bottom quadrant of the back page. You know, we've created a file where you can drop in your logo, and up in the upper right you'll see that what they did is they actually belly banded this as well to deliver it to their customer base, and really have so I'm told, been happy with the results, because what it's allowing you to do, in this case for Primary Color they did, you know, we're happy to have you use the content. It's awesome content. It's done by a great firm, Hybrid, in San Francisco. They work real hard on this stuff to get the smartest, latest information about making, and it's not just about printing even, and it's barely about paper. Oh, by the way, except that it happens to be printed on beautiful Mohawk Superfine, Loop, Strathmore Pure Cotton. There is an aha here, and most people get it when they hold this between their fingers. The format of these original, if you happen to have an HP 10,000 or an offset press, you know, we can make available the full size, which is 20 by 27 or something. It's like a big tabloid. When you open this thing and hold it in your hand, it's like holding a big press sheet. There's a reason for doing that. It's sort of like subtly introducing people to like a big printed sheet and not just this little, you know, booklet. I never end early. I just did. Deborah, mark your calendar on this. I mean, it's always, you know, and
I'm sad. I want to go again.
Yeah, I know you always like to go on this ride.
Yeah, I want to go again.
You know, it's always harder to interact, I think, on webinars. But if anybody has any comments, questions,
Yeah, there's a couple of things. First of all, actually now my audio is cutting in and out, oddly enough. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. First of all, someone, Kara would like to know if she can actually get a copy of your presentation. Would you mind sharing?
I would be honored to share with you, Kara.
Okay, Kara, we'll get that to you.
Got that.
And,
I sent it.
oh, that's right. I do have it. Okay, cool. Andrew Gordon has a question. Does Mohawk have research on the effectiveness of premium papers on response rates?
You know, yeah, anecdotally, it's that I can share with you what I will do if, Deborah, you can get me information.
Mm-hmm.
The best, the most updated information we have is from that Millward Brown study in that Maker third quarterly. It's funny, the entire printing and paper industry keeps going back to the same old trough of direct mail association research done in like 1987, literally. But this most recent body of information from Millward Brown in the UK, in a study that I haven't been able to get a hold of from Canada Post, has some real data, but it's more about sort of this impact in direct mail around print, of holding something in your hands. The premium paper piece, I will tell you we're trying to get at that. But I'd be lying if I told you we have this secret body of information that says if you use purple paper that's felt, people will send you their wallet in the mail and buy everything from you. So, sorry for the long answer. If you want to get me an address, I'll at least start by sending you the Third Maker Quarterly, or, this is very counter to what I've been saying, on MohawkConnects.com, you can see an issue version of that content if you just want to consume the content first quickly right now.
Okay, Andrew wants to do a research project with you, so that's cool. It can help everybody, so that would be
There's
awesome.
my email right there. If a webinar is, everybody knows how to get a hold of me.
Right, and speaking of the Maker magazine, how can people get that?
You can go to MohawkConnects.com. That's Mohawk, M-O-H-A-W-K, Connects, plural, MohawkConnects.com. And if you, on the home page, you will see, in the carousel, you'll see that there's a, scrolling by, there'll be those Maker materials. If you click on that image, you'll be prompted to a page that allows you to sign up for the quarterly. Yes, on the home page, people are demonstrating this for me here. You can subscribe now, and it's easy. It's the internet.
Okay, I actually have a question for you. You said something very interesting before about that the makers need print, but they don't know how to find it. How is your suggestion? What is your suggestion about how printers should go about? I don't want to say soliciting because that's the last thing that the makers want to have happen to them. So, how do you create that relationship, or what would your suggestions be?
Well, you know, I think part of it is if, you know, and I just spoke to a group of printing salespeople in Baltimore last week, and I think the president of the company was going to kick me in the fanny when I walked out. I said, go look for the smallest order you can find. You know, in other words, I did this very same presentation for them. I said, if you've got 10 hours in your day, take one and go look for these people that may be in your section of the city that so I think the answer is this. Pay attention to what businesses are coming up in your community. And I know that's probably part of everyone's frame of reference, but in particular, if you're seeing businesses that are doing craft beers, or they're the most, you know, they have the longest line at your farmer's market and they're making soap or whatever, or, you know, you live in San Francisco and you know that there's another photo greeting card company emerging. Make yourself known. Hint, they don't care about your equipment list. Bring them stuff that you've printed. Get some files and print them something. In other words, I think it's about looking. It may not be a design firm or a large corporation. It may be a small company that should be introduced to the impact print can have in a media mix. Oh, that sounds very jargony bullshit. Oh, well,
Okay.
in a multiple way to get to your customers.
The other thing I'm sorry?
Nothing. I'm ranting.
No, you're not. You're awesome. The other thing I want to ask you is that, when we spoke at D-Scoop, it was very interesting to me that you had mentioned that the makers that you were meeting with, or that group of people, were referring to the printers as manufacturers. They didn't even think of them as printers. How can I guess printers get the message of craft to them and out of that manufacturing frame of reference?
Well, I think it's that one little challenge I had there around marketing service provider or skilled craftsperson. It's really casting yourself as a craftsperson. I mean, I think that's most effectively done by showing them what you do, right? By bringing great samples. If that's a food company, I was at Woodbury Kitchen in Baltimore last week, and Woodbury Kitchen happened to be one of the honorees at the Martha Stewart American Made Award. We were hosting an event at their place, but what's fascinating about Woodbury Kitchen, and so what they're built around locally sourced food. They're exploding in terms of growth. Last year they were a James Beard honoree for food. And one thing they use a lot is they use printing. They letterpress print the labels on their food. They use letterpress for all their business cards. They letterpress print their menus because they want this very holistic experience when people come in and eat this food, which is all derived from farms within 2 hours of Baltimore. They want that experience to be consistent. Dodo Case in San Francisco wants a consistent experience too. It's the reason when they introduced pads that go along with these cases, they chose Mohawk Superfine. I mean, I don't want to lay an accusation here, but don't go sell the cheapest stuff you have, either the cheapest methodology or assume that it is totally a price discussion. It's really a quality discussion. And I think what's happened is as the digital platform, and I don't mean digital printing, I mean digital communication, is that glass screen has become a total commodity. People have forgotten that print can have such an amazing impact when you represent your products, represent your company, talk about your purpose in print.
I think that's awesome. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, it doesn't seem so. Chris, I don't even know how to thank you, but thank you so much for sharing yourself and your information with us. You know how I feel about you, so again, I'm really honored and thrilled that you chose to spend this hour with us. Again, thanks so much. Everybody go to MohawkConnects.com to sign up and get the Maker magazine. They actually print it. And also check out what's going on with Mohawk. We love Mohawk. And come to Print Chat every Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Mohawk hangs out with us there too. And that's it. So thank you, everybody. Chad, you can end the recording, and I will be sending out a link to the replay when it's ready. And thanks.